Run Jenny and Vicky and Heather. No landslides you can't overcome. Right? Good. And Bert, thank you. I do remember well and have witnessed your transformation and how it's happened for you. And by letting go and just finding yourself. Well, a lady went to a psychiatrist. And anyway, she went to the psychiatrist and she was sitting with him and he says, "How can I help you?" And she says, "I've got a phobia. And I don't even know if you've dealt with this one before." And he said, "Well, tell me about it." She said, "Well, when I go to bed, I am afraid, I get afraid that somebody's underneath the bed." And he said, "Well, what are you doing?" She said, "Well, I look under the bed and nobody's there. Then what do? I get back in bed and then I become afraid again." He said, "I treated one case like that over the years. And so I know what it's going to take. It's going to take 20 sessions for us to get to the point where you can overcome this phobia and get rest at night." And so she asked a natural question all of us would ask is, "How much is it?" And he said, $80 a session. And you have to come once a week. And she said, "Wow." Well, she went home, thought about it, and never called the doctor back. So he was surprised because their session went well, and so he calls her up and he says, I haven't seen you back. I'm wondering what's going on." She said, "Well, I'm cured." He said, "What do you mean you're cured?" And she said, "Well, I came home and I told my husband how much it was going to cost to see you for 20 sessions so I could be cured. And so he cut the legs out from under the bed and I feel fine now." I told the 9 o'clock service, the 11 o'clock service would understand that. Thank you. Oh, goodness. The courage to be vulnerable. Brene Brown has authored 4 books: The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and Braving the Wilderness. For many of us, those titles mean something, because we have been through much of that, and in particular, about 1.5 years ago, we went through her book, Daring Greatly. And what she is all about, no matter the title of the book, is the courage to be vulnerable, to take the risk of being connected, to take the risk in relationships, and she believes that's what we're here for, is to be connected. I believe we're here to be connected through relationships. It's the only thing I can understand that makes sense to me, so that we can discover ourselves and awaken to all that God is. But she says, what happens is, in order to be vulnerable, we have to take these risks of being intimate. Intimate not just with that one partner maybe you have chosen in life, but intimate with everybody. And that we have to take the risk to be compassionate, even with the person that we disagree with. And that's hard sometimes. Even the person we think has harmed us. And we have to break through our eggshell egos, because that's what they really are. But we think they're made of concrete sometimes. But they're just eggshells that we can break open with denials and affirmations. And it takes the courage to be imperfect. When we are vulnerable, we understand that we are not perfect. And I'm talking about in the form that the world sees perfection, not in the form in which divine mind or God sees perfection. Jesus said, "Be ye perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect." What we think he was saying, and go back to the Aramaic, is that he was saying, "Be ye inclusive as your Father in heaven is inclusive." Perfection in our world means do it the way I think you ought to do it. And if you don't, you're not perfect. And if I have any importance to you, that's very important to you, that I think that you're not imperfect. And so therefore what happens is that we aren't able to have the compassion to be kind to ourselves if we're not careful. But being vulnerable means we are really kind to ourselves. That we have the ability to connect in such a way that we belong to one another, that we care about one another, that we share with one another, and that we are honest with one another. That where there is conflict, that we understand that we can be in conflict and come out of the conflict because we know that we believe in the power of love. There's nothing wrong with conflict until it turns to a war. There's nothing wrong with conflict unless you become enemies. Conflict is natural. I mean, I wish our board agreed with everything I thought. But some of them don't, believe it or not. And they're usually right. That's what really hurts. But you see, conflict is natural in an intimate, open, vulnerable relationship. And as we go along, if we don't pay attention to this, we go into what we call breakdowns. We have a breakdown, nervous breakdown, all kinds of breakdowns. But as we continue to listen to our ego, as we support our ego, we get ourselves in some trouble, and then we have this breakdown of some type. And every breakdown is a breakthrough. Every breakdown is a breakthrough. Think about your life. Think about the situations you've been in. And when you were in the breakdown, you felt like it was the end of the world maybe, but all of a sudden one day, you see the light, you step out of the darkness, and oh my gosh, I learned from that breakthrough, or breakdown, and I wouldn't be who I am today without that breakthrough. And so we start to understand that when we're willing, again, to be vulnerable. Now, there are two big fears that most of us have, to some degree. One is the fear of failure. We don't want to fail. And there are lots of reasons for that. And we don't want to fail because of several reasons. One is because failing makes me worry about what people say about me, what people think of me. So instead of bringing up a new idea, I'll just be quiet about it. Instead of pointing out something that maybe is really out of balance, I'll just be quiet about it. Why should I take the risk? Because somebody may not like what I'm saying, and maybe it'll be a lot of people. The second thing is failing makes you worry about your ability to pursue the future you desire. You worry about it. And so we sabotage ourselves by coming up with negative ways of thinking about the future, even though we think we're being positive about it. The next thing that happens is that failure says that people will lose interest in me, and therefore, I may not have as many friends as I used to have. There may be a disconnect, and I don't want a disconnect. But yet we're fooling ourselves because you see, when we worry like that, we're already disconnected when we think that way. And then failing also says that you tend to tell people beforehand that you don't expect to succeed in order to lower their expectations. You ever done that? I think most of us have. I got this great idea, but it probably won't work. Vicki helps me with that. I have so many ideas. And a lot of times she's absolutely right. I've tried that before, okay? I'm trying to do the same thing the same way and expect to get a different result. And so therefore we have to open up ourselves to this idea that if we fail, we do not lower our expectations of ourselves. And then the real challenge is when I feel like I fail and I cannot find a road, I cannot imagine a way to do something differently so that I can succeed. Now, we all have a little bit of that. But if you got a lot of that, you may want to examine that. The second thing is the fear of success. Most of us have heard of these. Back in the 70s when I first heard of them, people weren't talking about it very much. Today they talk about it more. Fear of success is unlike fear of failure because it's built on some other things. Most of us are scared of achieving for a couple reasons. The first is change. If I succeed, I may have to move. If I succeed, I may have to change the way I live my life. If I succeed, I may actually have to do something that I'm afraid to do, that I'm uncomfortable with. And so therefore what happens is we decide we don't really want to change, even though we're talking about it. It's just too uncomfortable. And so one of the things that I'm spending a lot of time now is living in the year 2030. And you've heard me talk about it a little bit, and you'll hear some more as I go along. But here are some, I think, realistic predictions of change. 50% of all Fortune 500 companies will not be around in 2030. Wow. That's because of the change that's going to take place. Futurists are saying we're going to have more change in the next 20 years than we've had in 500 years. And people say, I'm not going to do that. You know, I remember when people said, I'm not going to walk around with one of those little phones where people bother you all the time. I'm not going to use the internet. How many people have a phone? Raise your hands. How many have? Okay, Mike's the only person without a phone. And I know better than that. We all have, and we have smartphones now, right? Did you know in 2024 there's an i24 phone coming out? I'm being truthful. It's an implant. Now, I know, you're going to say, nobody's going to implant something like that in me. I'm never going to use Facebook. Watch what we say, because it may come true. You know? And my guess it'll be the thing to do when it's done, and hopefully it won't hurt. And I hope I'm around to get one of those rascals. But anyway, these are the changes that are going to take place in our lives. And with change comes frustration. With change comes a sense of loss. And change comes being in hell in the hallway, as our friend said last year. In change, we feel like we're in the dark and we don't know where we're going. And so it's through this power of change that you and I together can help the world be more successful. Because people are going to need a place to go, to connect, to be vulnerable, that they feel safe, they feel trusted, and they can be creative in. That's what we're going to become. There's a center for creativity. And we don't know. In 2030, we may not be worshiping the way we worship today. I know we won't be totally. There'll be some changes. Because the world is changing. Now, that's the thing we have to get in our head. You see, I'm not going to change. Yes, you are. You're just not going to admit it until it's too late. Then you get frustrated. Then you got work to do. Then you got to go see that psychiatrist who charges you $80 an hour, and by then maybe $150 an hour for 20 weeks. Because we fight change. The second thing is that in the back of our minds, we start to understand when we are successful that we have more impact on more people. And that stops people from success sometimes. Because they don't know how that's going to impact them. They don't know how they're going to show up. And they get back to the concept of the fear of failure. And so fear of success says, I'm going to have more impact on more people. And if I'm wrong, wow. And so I undermine the dream. I undermine my idea. I undermine my success because I don't want to deal with it. There was a woman who came to El Paso when I was there. It was my first year of being the minister there. And it was an Easter Sunday. And she came in on Easter Sunday, and I greeted her, and I think we maybe had 60 or 70 people that particular year, it was the first year. And so I knew everybody who walked in, that had a new face. And so I went over and talked to her, and I said, gosh, it's really glad to have you here. What made you come to Unity? And she said, well, I'm a Methodist. The church parking lot at my church was full, and yours was not, so I came here. True story. She stayed for 3 years. We became great friends. She and her husband and Vicki and I got together pretty regularly the whole time I lived in El Paso after meeting her. However, in classes and at times, she would share that she didn't want to be responsible for being an expression of God. That was just too much to ask for somebody. That she liked the idea to ask God to forgive you and forget about it. Okay? And it's okay to ask for forgiveness, but we have to do something with that. And we have to come to realize that God has already forgiven us. It's nothing for God. God sees us in our perfection, not our imperfection. And so, over time, like I said, she finally quit going because it was and she was very active. She worked with the children, she sang in the choir, all kinds of things. But she just couldn't get past that idea that she was responsible and had to make an impact, if she was responsible, on others in a positive way. She understood, not preaching to others, but the way we act and treat others. And she was a beautiful person, by the way. And so, as we look at this impact that we have on people, we have to understand that the divinity in you will never give you an idea you cannot accomplish. I believe that with all my heart. But it takes the courage to be vulnerable in order to do that. To take the risk of failing and understanding it's okay to fail because I learned from the failure and I can figure out another way to succeed. Suppose Edison decided after his 5th experiment on a light bulb it couldn't be done. He only tried 9,000 times or so. And somebody said, you failed. He said, no, I just did it the wrong way 9,000 times and I found the right way. That's how we have to look at ourselves, because you see, in a sense of failure, our fear of success, what we start to do is say, if we make a mistake, we are not worthy. When we start to say we are not worthy, we don't think we can be an expression of God. We don't think we can connect with God. But when we feel like we are worthy, and we are, and you are, it takes on a whole other dimension of those unlimited potentials, those fields of unlimited possibilities that Bert was talking about. A huge difference in dimension and thinking. And what it starts to do is bring joy in your life because you have a purpose. It starts to bring love into your life because you become more loving. It starts to bring people into your life that you've never met before because you are compassionate. Over 60 people here, 50 people here volunteered their time in Caritas with people they didn't know, but they got to know. Because we are compassionate and we're willing to take a risk to do that. And so, as we move forward, we start to understand through our successes, because we did it by being led by Spirit. We discerned what is ours to do. We didn't worry about how. We just discerned it was ours to do. And the how took care of its place. And so what I would like for you to remember today is that you are worthy because you are unique. You are alive because you become an agent for change. Each of you is an agent for change. You are growing because you are vulnerable. You're willing to take a risk. You're willing to sign on for the greater good. And you are creating because you are courageous. So know that you are worthy. Know that you are courageous. Know that you are vulnerable. Affirm it. Let it happen. And Brene Brown says what you'll do is step into joy. What you will do is step into love. What you will do is step into compassion. What you will do is step into your real self. I think that's worth the journey, don't you? God bless you. Thank you. And so I do believe that it's time for our prosperity blessing. Mike, do you have a check today with you? Did they give you one? Okay. Who's coming up here? Steve and Fred. Now notice what Fred did. He put his check in the bag. I just want you to know. He set an example, okay? So we are so blessed, and as we know that we are blessed, we have great things happening here at Unity of Richmond. We